This is fine. This is all very well. It's come very late. Let's hope for the Ukrainians it's not too late, in their view, to try and turn this around. But is this the end of the game? I mean, where does this now go? Do we now sit back in a self-satisfied fashion saying, well, the EU's given 50 billion euros and the US has given 61 billion and the UK has given 2.5 billion. So that's all fine. It's going to lead to weapons. Or where does this go now? What is the end game for Ukraine? That is my question to you. What is the end game for Ukraine? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. You can also ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC. What is the end game for Ukraine? Joining me to discuss this is Leigh Turner, former UK ambassador to Ukraine and author of the upcoming book, Lessons in Diplomacy. Very good afternoon to you, Leigh. Thank you for joining me. How significant is this approval of this package by the US House of Representatives?
Good afternoon, Ali. This is really important for all of us. Of course, it's excellent news for Ukraine, this $61 billion, £49 billion package, but it's also really great for the UK and for anyone, anywhere, who doesn't like the idea that countries should be able to steal their neighbour's land and get away with it. The way I look at this investment is that it's like an investment in the long-term security of the United States itself. In fact, the security of all of us. As the Ukrainian foreign minister said in the clip you just played, since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 and again in 2022, President Putin has been promoting a weird but dangerous kind of 21st century land-grabbing imperialism of a kind we haven't seen since the Second World War. And if Putin can break that taboo that you can't invade your neighbour and steal their land, the whole world faces a Pandora's box of new and dangerous conflicts, and that affects the UK as well as anyone else.
Well, you say it's in America's interest and in all of our interests as well. Why do you think then that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's the very outspoken congresswoman, said it was disgusting that more money was going to Ukraine and declared during Saturday's debate in Congress, and I quote, "You never hear anybody demanding peace. That's because it doesn't fit the business model."
I think that people in the US debate have become involved in a very understandable but partisan kind of debate about where to spend money. And what the opposition, which is the Republican Party at the moment, have been trying to do is to stop anything that the government of Joe Biden wants to do. And so they're coming up with any argument they can think of to prevent this package from passing, just in order to score political points in Washington. The fact is that if Russia were allowed to win its war against Ukraine, it would mean orders of magnitude more military spending, including for the US, than this package that they've just passed. It's cheap for them. We've seen it. We are seeing it here in the UK. You've probably seen Penny Mordaunt just said we need a new air defence system for the UK, like Israel's Iron Dome. That would be eye-wateringly expensive. But we're going to need it, and much, much more other military spending, if a newly aggressive Russia wins its war of conquest against Ukraine.
Now, you say wins its war of conquest against Ukraine. What does winning for the Ukrainians actually mean? What does it look like? Because this is the issue that happens and has been happening since the very start of this war, that people do not define what victory actually looks like. What does it mean in your view?
The Ukrainians are very clear what winning means. It means expelling Russia's invading troops from the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine, which includes eastern Ukraine and, of course, Crimea. The reason why calls for a ceasefire or for trading land for peace don't make any sense, quite apart from setting this precedent that I've talked about, allowing a country to get away with stealing land in a colonialist way, are that there is no safe landing zone at this point for a settlement, for a diplomatic settlement between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine wants its land back, and I can see that. Russia, and in particular President Putin, have to be seen to have won this war, which they launched completely without any provocation, entirely to protect the political position of Vladimir Putin, who's afraid of democracy, he's afraid of free elections in Russia because He knows that that would probably lead to him being voted out of office and a very uncertain future. So Vladimir Putin is desperate to annex land from Ukraine into Russia, and Ukraine just wants its land back. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Do you think that if President Putin is so desperate, as you say, and clearly he is, that he actually has a different risk appetite and a different calculus that he's operating to compared to the West? And I'll give you some evidence of this. We are currently in a scenario now where Russia is spending 40% of its GDP on the war. It's operating a 6-day-a-week economy, which is built around the war effort. And it's spending, it's also, according to the latest GDP figures, spending around 6% or a third of government spending on this war. And it is also now producing a huge amount of artillery. By this month, Russians were firing 10,000 artillery shells every day, and the Ukrainians were down to 2,000. I mean, this individual, President Putin, has got a much longer time horizon and a higher risk appetite than the West has for the fight.
It's absolutely true that for President Putin, this war is existential. If Russia isn't seen to have won this war inside Russia, he's toast. So the government of President Putin has been pouring resources into this war. We have to look carefully at their claims for how much weapons they have, how many shells they're firing, etc., because they're trying to make it look as if they're invincible, which of course they're not, as we've repeatedly seen throughout the last 2 years. Russia is much weaker than it appears to be. But at the same time, Putin has to try and show that he's winning this war, and he will do anything he can to keep it going. And you're right that for us in living peacefully in countries such as the UK or the US, this war seems a long way away, and it's very difficult to persuade people that we should be spending money on shells for Ukraine rather than new hospitals for the NHS or whatever else we might be spending our money on. But in the long term, if Russia wins this war, it will mean us having to spend much, much more on defense and actually living in a much more dangerous world.